yet, Ms. Giovanelli? Am I missing her?
No, she's not, but it's 1 o'clock, so
Okay, thank you.
we will catch her when she gets in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we will begin then. Good afternoon. Today is Tuesday, June 23rd, 2020, and we are at 1 o'clock. I'm going to read the following to you. Following the recommendations of Governor DeSantis and the Florida Department of Education, this meeting will be held virtually and will be streamlined on the district YouTube channel. A public comment submission form is available via leedschool.net/leadership/school_board_meetings. Click on e-comments or see the instructions on the public comments section of the agenda for information on how to submit your comments via email. The public can also comment on agenda items in person through the following procedure. A line form outside the LCPEC with 6 feet of separation between each speaker. One person at a time will be allowed into the boardroom. A laptop signed into the board meetings will be at the podium with the microphone open and the camera on for them to comment. The board attorney will recognize the speaker so they can start and alert them when their time has expired. On today's agenda, we have 4 items under operations followed by public comments. And Dr. Atkins, if you would introduce the first one, please.
Yes, I will, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. I'm very excited actually to get to this agenda item. This is our proximity plan update. We are going to see a presentation today that will give us kind of a progress report on where we are. Remember, this is one of our big 5 goals as a governance team, part of our strategic plan. And I think this is going to really provide us, I think, a more equitable opportunities for our students across the district while also making us much more efficient, I think, from a transportation perspective, and allow more of our students to attend schools closer to home. So again, I am excited, and I also want to just commend the board. This is a pretty courageous step that we are traveling on right now. But I think it's in the best interest of our school district, and I think you'll be impressed. So at this time, I would like to go ahead and introduce Courtney Gordon, who's with the school district as a GIS specialist, and then she will introduce David Cates, who's with Davis Demographics for the remainder of the presentation. So Ms. Gordon.
Thank you, Dr. Atkins. Good afternoon, members of the board. As Dr. Atkins mentioned, my name is Courtney Gordon, and I'm a GIS planner for the district and project manager for the proximity plan. If you don't mind going ahead and putting the PowerPoint up now, I'd greatly appreciate it. I'm going to provide a brief overview of the project timeline before I hand things over to David. If we can please go to the next slide. From March to May, Davis Demographics compiled GIS data from Lee County and various municipalities. They also mapped 4 years of student data and broke the district down into study areas. Most recently, they prepared 10-year forecasts that factor in a number of things, including historical birth data, student mobility, and student generation rates. David will go over all of this in more detail. Currently, we are working with Davis on the initial boundary scenarios. Between July and October, we expect to begin working with committees to present the initial scenarios, and in November, we anticipate sharing those initial scenarios with the public. If we can please move on to the next slide. Excuse me. In October, we expect to begin revising the 10-year forecast based on the updated data. And in January of next year, we anticipate revising the scenarios based on the updated 10-year forecasts. In March of 2021, we plan to present the revised scenarios and maps to the public. And in July of 2021, we anticipate making a final recommendation to the board. If we can go on to the next slide, please. We're right on track with our current timeline goals. The GIS data is complete. This includes active residential development, planned projects, 4 years of student data, and the study areas. The 10-year forecasts are complete until we revisit them in October. Davis and the core project team continue to meet on a weekly basis, sometimes more if necessary. I will now turn it over to David with Davis Demographics so he can provide you with a much more in-depth look at the methodology. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. Again, my name is David Cates with Davis Demographics and Planning. I presented to you about 4 months ago. Hopefully we'll make this less of a gap there, maybe every few months give you updates on the project. If you move on to the next slide, I want to kind of give you an overview of what we've been doing since I last presented to you. There's been a lot of work completed. As Courtney mentioned, what we've done is broken your district down into, you see there are 1,149, what we call study areas. You can look at them as neighborhoods. The criteria we use to split these areas up, we look at your current street network. You should be able to see that through the green line outlines there. Obviously, things like water features, your railways or freeways are another major criteria. We also have your current subzones. We've also incorporated, there's 22 planning communities that the county planning level breaks your district up into. We'll discuss this in a few minutes more. And we'll also look at your student data. We go through a process where we call geocoding. We put dots where the students live so we can look at the density of the students in each of these areas or neighborhoods. And we try to keep it, if we can, about 100 K-12 kids per area. So some of these shapes might look a little funny, but there is kind of a method to our madness, how we come up with them. They go around major projects as well. We just completed our 10-year forecast. I'll be sharing that with you as well. So each of these 1,149 areas, there is a current count of kids. We know what's been living in that area for the last 4 years with those student data files. And we also roll this out for 10 consecutive years. So we actually create 1,149 individual projections, and then we can use these as the building blocks for your current and future boundaries. Next slide, please. A general overview of our forecasting or projection methodology. We look on the left side there with the birth data. This is how we anticipate or try to forecast your future kindergarten class sizes. I'll show you the birth data and how we come up with that. The mobility factors there in the middle, these we use your current and your last 3 years student data. We want to look at what is happening in your established neighborhoods or study areas. So we look at areas without any development and want to capture the trends that are going on in there. And then we roll those out over the next 10 years as well. And at the far right, you can see at the bottom there, we take your residential developments that we've been researching over the past 3+ months. We have annual forecasts for how many new units are going to be entering your district, and we apply what we call student yield factors, or also known as student generation rates, to those units so we can estimate each year how many new students are going to be entering your district from those new housing. Next slide, please. So let's kind of look at a general overview of these factors one by one. This is looks like the last 20 years of live birth data in your county, in your district, going back to the year 2000. You can see it kind of spiked there in the mid-2000s. If you think about your current kindergarten class, the student file we received was from October 2019. Most of those kindergartners are 5 years old. So we look at the 2014 live birth data, more or less when those kindergartners were born, as what we call our base year. So you can see that kind of highlighted in red for 2014. But if you go back in time, you can see that for 2005, 6, and 7 is when they kind of peaked at the number of live births. That should have correlated with 5 years later, your kindergarten class sizes. We know that all these kids are not necessarily attending your schools. It could be charter schools or others. But what we like to look for with the birth data is trends. So it's been around for a little while there, about 6,200 for a little while there. And then this base year, 2014, a little over 6,300. You can see the next 4 years it's higher. So we use the rates that we use to anticipate that your kindergarten class sizes should be a little higher the next 4 years as compared to the current base year. We'll get into that a little bit more. So if you please move to the next slide. Next, thank you. As I showed you before, these are these study areas. I didn't mention the numbers, what the numbers mean, the 1400s and the 1412s. We give unique identifying numbers to these neighborhoods. We usually start with groups of 100. So that's why they kind of jump up that many, over 13, 14, 1500 numbers. These are when we do our boundary work with the committee. These will be our reference numbers that if we want to adjust or move boundaries, we use those numbers for that. So we've mapped, or what we call geocoded, your last 4 years of student data. So we received October snapshots from 2019 back to 2016. And we do annual comparisons, kindergartners 1 year, first graders the next, second graders 1 year, third graders the next. We look at all the transitions, and these are what we call our mobility factors. These are the kind of the diagonal numbers as they progress through the grades over the years. The mobility factors capture resales, what's going in your resale market. Remember, these are not areas we look at for new housing, so we exclude the ones that have new housing. We look at, it also captures apartment trends or migration. At the high school rates, it can look at dropout rates at those grades as well. So there's a lot of different trends that the mobility factors capture. We also have spent, as I mentioned, it's a good 3+ months either visiting. When I made 2 trips out there, one in February, one in March. I spent a couple of days with my colleagues driving and visiting sales offices of active residential developments, speaking with the salespeople, as many as we could at that time. Since obviously we got cut off on our trips out there, we had to do it all remotely. So we called all the ones we couldn't visit. We actually had conference calls and in-person meetings when I was out there with the county several times, their planning departments, several of your municipalities or cities. We've been in contact with all the planners and we've received feedback from them and incorporated that into our information we entered into the system. You can see those pink outlined kind of orange looking blobs. Those are the footprints of your current or future housing developments. And I'll talk about them a little bit more if we can move on the next slide there. This is a screen capture of kind of the heart of the Cape Coral area. As you probably can see the diagonal street there, Pine Island Boulevard, it's kind of the natural dividing point in that community. We did meet with the planners there. You can see that in my notes there, we have really excellent parcel information from the county. I really commend your county. They really keep excellent records. We were able to extract, based on year built, that there's been about 8,000 units built over the last 5 years in the Cape Coral area. And as you all know, that's most of your development's happening out there and most of your student growth has been happening out there. So for our forecast, based on the information we received from them and our visits, we estimate about a little over 14,500 potential units over the next 10 years. And the reason why I have this picture on here, as you can see the gray boxes, some small, some large, those are the vacant residentially zoned property in this screen capture. So you can see below the Pine Island Boulevard, there's a lot less of them because for all these many 30, 40 years, that's where the development has been happening. The infrastructure is in, and they've been selling very well down there. It's the northern part that really has been kind of sporadic. But the city assured us that in the next few years, they're going to start putting a lot more infrastructure in north of Pine Island. That could be more sewer lines, maybe electrical, improving the streets. So as you can see down there, as those units south of Pine Island sell out, let's say over the next 5 years, maybe the next 5 years, the last 5 years of our 10-year forecast, there'll be a lot more growth in the northern part based on what they told us. So it's going to shift from the south to the north. and that's where most of your development's going to happen. Fort Myers still has over 13,000 more units that can be built over the next 10 years based on our conversations with the city and with the visits we made. And then you can see the big drop down there. Two other major areas, Southeast Lee County, up to 3,000 more units over the next 10 years. And then Lehigh Acres, just under 2,300 units we're anticipating to be built in there. Next slide, please. So a little more overview on the development forecasts. Overall, next 10 years, we're anticipating a little over 43,000 new residential units to be built. Over the next 5, which we have the most up-to-date, accurate information, we estimate 26,769. As you can imagine, it's almost hard to really do a true, what's going to happen in 5-10 years from now. We did pose that question to all of the cities in the county, and they shared with us the best information they have. But there can be projects that are not even on the books now that could come online. So based on our information, most of the units are going to be happening over the next 5, and it's going to taper off, but we'll get updates on that as the years progress. The last 5 years, the district has had over roughly 29,000 units built. Just to put this into perspective, that this is not unprecedented. We're in line with what has been experiencing in the district. I also put in there that the COVID-19 impact, it's really right now hard to really fully understand the impact on the housing market. When we completed most of our surveys, it was probably done by March or April, which was the early stages of that. Housing construction has not or had not slowed down at all. It's the sales part that we're not quite sure yet. But the good news is the way this study and our plans are for your new elementary proximity boundaries, this is going to go on for another year. So we are going to get a refresh. Courtney mentioned in October, we'll receive a new student file to update the data. Working with your staff, we will be updating all the development. So by October, November, we should have a better feel for the sales impact. Maybe there's been no impact. Maybe it might even increase. We don't know. But at least we'll do a refresh so that we update all the information with the most current data. Next slide, please. Now, how do we estimate the students that are coming out of these new housing units? There's a term you might have heard of, student generation rates. It's a fraction or a number that gets applied to those new units that are built every year. We break it down into 3 main housing types. Single-family detached are your typical single-family homes. They come in all different sizes, but typical single-family homes. You have villas or maybe duplexes, they're sometimes referred to in your community. Looks like 2 homes kind of right sharing the same common wall with 2 driveways side by side. In fact, in this snapshot of this development on the screen, that was a mix of both single family and villas being built at the same time. The villas are the little bit smaller lots, smaller squares, or I should say rectangles. And then we look at apartments, the rentals, and there's a lot of construction, as you probably have all seen, in the apartments, and they still plan to continue those for the next 5-10 years. When we do our research, we collect the county parcel data, as you see on the screen. We're able to tag or map the recently built, and I use usually a 5-year window, so 2014 to 19 is my window. I used the orange squares or rectangles. Those are in that project, the ones that have been built during that window. So now we know when they've been built, those dots are the students that are living within them. So using our GIS software, we're able to get extremely accurate rates as to knowing a certain number of housing type and exactly the number and type of unit and students coming out of those. And we organize those by 22 planning communities that the county uses to break up your district. So I'm going to show some of these to you on the next slide. All right, I'm not going to show you all of them, but I just picked a few key communities in your district. Lehigh Acres has the highest generation rate or yields coming out of the units. 0.509 K-12 factor means for every 100 homes built there is generating roughly 51 K-12 kids. The next highest is Cape Coral, and that's a big drop down. The 0.303, same idea, every 100 homes there generating 30 kids. And the district-wide average is the 0.218. There's other areas that are kind of below Cape Coral and even below the district-wide average, and they'll be in our report. We'll have all 22 communities. Not as much going on the islands, obviously, and some of the more remote parts of your district, but we don't like to use general district-wide factors. We like to break it down by smaller communities because there's different things going on in different parts of your district, and we look at everything geographically, so I really want to make sure we have community-oriented factors when we run your projections. The next slide, please. So putting all those factors together, what did we come up with? And actually, I'm kind of covered up here, but you can see we're anticipating the growth of over 10,000 students, PK-12 students, over the next 10 years. It's in line with what you've experienced in the last 10 years or so. And I've also broken that number down into your three predominant regions, your east, your south, and your west. The east has most of the projected growth. That includes Lehigh Acres and parts of maybe a little bit of Fort Myers and areas to the northeast of your district. The middle there, you can see that's the south, which pretty much is all of Fort Myers is in there. And then you see the west, that's pretty much Cape Coral. That's the impact in those three regions. Net growth overall, we're anticipating almost 12% growth in your district over the next 10 years. Next slide, please. And when we had our first few meetings with the committee, our criteria was to determine what information are we going to use to test these new boundaries for diversity and equity. And these are the information fields that we came up with. And the first 5 are straight from the student files. Those dots I showed you, behind every dot is a student record. We know their test scores that are on there, language proficiency, free and reduced lunch status, and also whether they're self-contained or special day class students. And then we also have our forecast, our 10-year forecast, based on those individual neighborhoods or study areas. And we will be looking at the district's capacities in each of their elementary schools so we can make sure that when we come up with these areas that the schools have room for the growth for what might be coming in over the next 5-10 years. Down the next grouping there at the bottom, these are from various reports that we're able to extract geographically. I could pick any size area from as small as a study area to as large as your entire district, or in this case, we'll be looking at your future proximity zones. I could pull up historically your census data from 2000, 2010, your current numbers, your projected numbers based on for population and household sizes. Also, median household incomes and home values are critical indicators. There's a diversity index that looks at race and ethnicity for your district as a whole and different communities. There's a housing affordability index. Parts of your district are more affordable than others. That's a really good indicator. And then there's other ones like percent income towards a mortgage is what a family of a certain household income is applying towards their mortgage. The higher the percentage, let's just say a little more danger zone there is, the lower the percentage, that's more affordable, for those families. We'll be able to track those as well. And then we have tapestry segmentations, top 3 to 5 to look at. What are those? There's the nationwide, there's been 67 distinct segments, and we could look in your county to see what characteristics are present in certain communities and be able to see how that ties in district-wide with your current subzones and then your future smaller zones as well. So the next slide, please, too. Another thing I shared with the committee and the district staff, this is part of the GIS part. This is a 2-mile walk or drive zone. I just picked southwest, the southern part of Cape Coral, the West Zone 3. And these are drawing from the center point of where the school is out 2 miles. So I just picked Cape Coral because it's elementary isolated, but using our software tools, we know there were exactly 425 K-5 students in there as of October 2019. And you can see the cluster of those 2-mile walk zones in the other part, there's some overlaps. So some of the people that live in their areas are within 2 miles of maybe 3 or 4 different schools. And then what this also shows you are those areas of Cape Coral that are not covered by that 2-mile walk zone. So those are ones that most likely would have to be bused or have quite a distance to get to a certain school. Or if we do this exercise for other parts of the district, it might give you better ideas as to where maybe new future schools to open to better address the student population that's not near a particular school. So we will be using this also as some of our criteria with the committee with transportation, as we said, to minimize it and to get a visualization of the transportation distances. Also, I don't know if Courtney mentioned this, we have taken all this GIS data and turned it over to your district staff. So Courtney and Cindy have access to all the same data. We'll have periodic training sessions with them to help them kind of get a better angle on how we use it. But Courtney is very proficient in GIS, so she'll be able to do a lot of queries and research herself, and we'll be working in tandem with them on that. Next slide. And just to wrap up kind of where we are and where we're going from this point forward, now that we have the forecast done and we have all the data we're going to use for testing, now we can start our scenario work, where we as in Davis, with your core district staff, come up with a boundary, potential set of new proximity zones, work with them, maybe do a little bit of back and forth, check it with some of the numbers, and then we present it to extended district staff, and ultimately, probably closer to later in the summer or early fall, we extend it out to the community stakeholders. They'll have an input on it before we take it to the public, the general public. I think we're anticipating November is when the general public would get first opportunity to look at some of the scenarios we've been working with. And just to remind everybody what we're trying to do here, we're trying to make these into smaller zones to be able to help you with your transportation, as well as at the same time checking to make sure that the boundaries are as equitable and diverse as possible. And I think your staff could attest, we've got everything lined up to do the work. Now we kind of roll up our sleeves and start the work, starting mostly in July on. I think that was my last slide. You can move, I think it's just questions on the next one. And if you have any questions, myself or Courtney would be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. That was a lot. Are there any questions, please, for David? Ms. Petrika?
Thank you. Couple of questions. Did you take into consideration at all, I believe there's an increasing number of multiple families living in the same households in Lee County. Was that taken into consideration at all?
Yeah, that's automatically inherently within our mobility factors. As you saw those dots, if there's large families or multiple families, those dots it's a little deceiving because it looks like one dot, it could be 10.
Okay.
Apartment complex that might have 100, might look like one, but yeah, they're all in there. They're all being accounted for.
Okay. It looks like you got good cooperation from other governing bodies or entities in the county. I think that's great.
Excellent, yes.
And when this is done, when the elementary proximity thing is done, this is just me speaking, I'd like to have a conversation with the board to determine whether we should move on to middle school and do something similar in terms of proximity for middle school. Will you have to reinvent the wheel if we do that, or will you be able to use this data all over again?
No, well, it's not reinventing the wheel. We're not going to have to go that extreme, but every October we would request, and it's part of our quote, if you renew with us, that we will update the forecasts because you want to bring in the new student data and then any new developments that might come in. So it's more of a refresh. It's probably a better way to phrase it. We just don't go with a forecast and stick with it for 5 years. It's always kind of changing. So we, as in Davis, you've hired us to do the forecasting part. We will be training your staff at some point, probably over the summer, to be able to learn the details and how to do that as well. But for us, as long as we're hired, we're the ones controlling the forecast part. But we're also getting a lot of assistance with your, as I mentioned, we're going to have a meeting next week with your staff on how to handle the updates for the development. It's a lot better to have your staff doing it now because you are obviously, even if I was there, but I'm in California, it's a lot easier to have people that are there that can make weekly trips or visits and maybe even have monthly discussions with your municipalities, and county. We, as you mentioned, I really have to commend, I have to say, your staff is incredible. I wanted to say that. Everyone from the top down, from Dr. Atkins, everybody. It's been really a very cooperative effort. It is a very daunting task, to imagine the beginning. Having to reach out to, I had to learn all your municipalities. I probably only knew 2 or 3 of your cities. Now I could, by heart, know your whole district. So we did meet with all of them. They've all been very helpful. The county provided us an enormous amount of GIS data. So that really helped us, and Fort Myers as well, the city of Fort Myers, that really helped save us a lot of time. So yeah, they've been very, very helpful.
Excellent. I really, really appreciate your work, and I'm really excited to see this through to the end. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Gittens, please.
Yes, thank you. And hello, is it Mr. Cates?
Yes, yes it is. Can you see me okay? I don't know if you're looking at the PowerPoint still or you see me. I don't know.
Oh no, we see you now.
Okay, I might, yeah, unfortunately. And it's the first time I probably put on a suit in like 3 months too.
Well, the good thing you can have jeans on with the suit, so it's okay. Okay, couple of questions. I think it was on slide 4. You were talking about the different meetings and groups that you would meet with. I'm from District 5, which is East Zone, and we are not really a municipality or anything because we're unincorporated. And I was just interested, who did you meet with and coordinate with besides the county commissioners to come up with the ideas for this area?
Well, for the unincorporated county areas, they're mostly governed by the county. We had, at least I know for sure, 2 in-person meetings with the county. The county provides the entire parcel data file to us, and the district staff has it as well. So every corner of your district, I have all the information on it. I know what type of units are there. I know how many have been built, like I showed you. So even in those remote areas you're talking about, we have information on those. And in the county, they maintain the development that are in the unincorporated part. So we receive from them all the future projects that, I don't know, hopefully you're aware of. If not, you will be made aware of, that is going to possibly be happening over the next 10 years. We learned a lot. I mean, there was even, I think, some of your staff. There's parts like, I don't know why I'm.
Well, that's okay. It's very.
Well, is it Babcock Ranch, or what's the? Is that the one? The northern part, like that's an unincorporated county area. It's been building north of your district or your county for several years. So we receive the information of those future lots that haven't even hit your county yet. So we have the footprints of that in other projects too.
Well, and my next question has to do with the future projections. And you said you look out 4 years, 10 years, or whatever. we have, and the impact on that is two major things. One is COVID and the other is Census 2020. And we don't have the data for either one of those complete to know what to do. So doesn't that make this a little more difficult to project? Because, for example, with census, I know that there's a definite increase in the numbers that are, participating in the census, which are going to have a definite impact on what you're doing projection-wise. Is that
right? Well, to answer your question, a couple of things. One, as far as the COVID impact, as I mentioned, we're going to be doing the research over the summer and the fall to see how sales are going. In my business, we only work for public school districts, and we track development all across the country. So trust me, you're not the only one district that's concerned on that, especially a district like yours that has so much development going on. You're dependent on that, with the new kids. So we're constantly looking at the latest articles or economists and people looking at those things. I've heard arguments, people saying it's going to decrease. I've heard others strongly say it's going to increase, that it's going to pick up and housing prices might even start to go up. I could spend hours talking about this, but we're keeping a good pulse on that part of it. The good news is that come October, there will be a refresh of the numbers. So if the sales are going down, the numbers will be adjusted accordingly. As far as the census information, yes, it's in the middle of going through that now. I'm not sure the impact on COVID-19 on that. That's another interesting question. I don't know if that's going to be pushed into 2021. The information that comes out of that is almost 6 to 9 months later. So we really will receive, we've always known that, information until sometime in mid to late 2021. We've always known that we use census information to supplement the work that we do. It's not the foundation. So I do have the historical census information, but we also have, as I mentioned, a little bit of very specific demographic or geographic regions in your district. And we have a company that we use that do census forecasting. Because, censuses are every 10 years. What about the 10 years in between? So there's a lot of companies that look at, so I already know a rough idea what they're anticipating for next year or the next few years. But when they do their refresh next year with the numbers, we look at that as well. But it's more of a supplement, so it's not going to hinder the work that we're doing for you.
So I have a couple of questions, but I will probably just get the email and email you those. I have one last one, though.
Sure.
For the sake of time. I think Ms. Patrica kind of hit on about when are we going to do the next phase, middle and high school. And it's confusing to my little brain that if we do all of this for elementary school, and most of, you mentioned that a lot of our areas are multi-family or multi-households, with families within a household. So you've got some that are going to elementary, some going to middle, some going to high. So as we're doing this for elementary school, and then let's say I've got 2 in middle school and 1 in high school, how is this going to affect, that 2-mile radius? Are we just keeping that 2 mile for elementary and then come what may for the middle and high school? Because you may have to go, 10 miles down the road.
Sure. Yeah, no, we're looking at this kind of one thing at a time, but let me back up a bit. When we do our forecasts, as you saw in my previous slides, we're not just forecasting your elementary population. We did all of yours. We did your middle and your high school students. And every time we do a refresh, we're doing all your students. And we are tracking the charter students as well, and pre-K. So we're not ignoring, I just want you to know, as far as the forecasts go, we are forecasting all your kids. But when we're doing the redistricting part, the boundary work, we're only focusing on your elementary age students. But I'm not, when you look at our reports you'll receive from us in the next month or so, you'll be able to look at our forecasts for your other grade levels. So I just want to make you aware of that. When I do the 2-mile walk zones, that was just a number I picked off the top of my head. I think by coincidence, it might really be your walk zones for your schools. Our software tools, and you have this in-house, you could pick any distance you want, anywhere from a half mile to 10 miles. So that was just an example. So they're easily adjustable. And as far as your next level work, your middle, your high schools, I totally understand why your district went about the ITN or the request for proposals this way, because you wanted to see how this worked for your elementaries. And if it went well and smooth, you have the option to hire us to continue on or pick someone else or do it yourself. It's an option. It's your choice. We're there to help you. But the process would be pretty much the same process, but we're just focusing on a different set of student members. That's all.
My last statement is not a question, a statement, basically. My main concern.
Ms. Gittens, is it pertaining to this? Because I know we have
Yes,
to move
it
on.
is. Can I just finish my last
Thank you.
sentence? My major concern with proximity is demographics and socioeconomics. This is an easier process to do in an area that has a higher socioeconomic, source than it is to do in an area that has large pockets that is not as high socioeconomic, is not as high achievement-wise academically. So you're ending up having pockets and having to bring in a lot more children to make that equality that you're talking about. And that's my last statement. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We'll take that all into account.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Fisher?
Thank you, but my question was answered through someone else's, so thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Vaughn?
Thanks. I have a question about the student generation rates, but before I ask, would you please repeat what you said about per 100 homes? Like, for instance, Lehigh, it was 0.509.
Correct. So I just use that example. For every 100 homes, if you multiply that number by 100, it becomes 50.9. So I just said you get 51 students. It's just another way of understanding the factors.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood. And
No, that's okay.
yeah, you said that the district average was 0.218. Do you happen to have at hand what areas have the least number of student generation, or the least amount, or the lowest amount of student generation rates that fall below the average?
Right in front of me, I don't have, we have it. So you can request that from staff and they could provide that to you. I try to keep this as, simple as possible. Yeah, we have all the areas for that. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and I don't think it was a surprise to any of us that Lehigh was the highest. Okay.
Right.
Thing is, it's to piggyback off of what Ms. Gittens just said. So as these circles, or, as these lines have been drawn with geography in mind, et cetera, and the location of current schools, what kind of, has there been any kind of a natural diversity in the demographics there, diversity in socioeconomics, or are we looking at school X, everybody circling that school is low socioeconomic, and how does that shake out and do to prevent a lack of diversity in our schools moving forward?
Right. Well, as far as the process, we're just now getting started with looking at starting that. So I don't have any quite answers. Maybe the next time I present to you, we can get into more specifics. But that one slide I showed you, and then I'm assuming you'll get a copy of it if you don't have it already. You could look at it. The student data that we're looking at, as well as the report information, it covers it checks all the boxes. All the socioeconomic things. Certain communities stand out more than others in different areas. Maybe it's more expensive or less expensive, or household income is more or less. Your district is very diverse. I mean, let's just speak in general. You have 22 very unique communities. It is a daunting task, but I think for the 20 to 25 district staff that we presented to last Thursday, they are on board that we believe, the right criteria to check these boundaries for the diversity you're talking about and the equity. So we have to kind of get the process rolling to be able to answer both of the last two questions. Yes, we're going to look at everything. We're not going to just make one concentrate area a zone. We might have to combine a few areas. We're just not going to make them as large as your current subzones are, but we're going to, as Dr. Savage has said to me, we're going to maybe blow up the subzone boundary lines and start from scratch. And I just use the planning communities as a smaller area. Instead of having 12, now we have 22. It's a starting point. We might combine certain communities, we might break up certain communities. We're just in the very early stages of doing that. That's why we have a full year to do this. I think everyone will have, including the public, their chance for input. And we're going to be very careful for all of you. I just want you to know that we're going to make sure that the community has representatives from everywhere. So each of you, from where you're community, you're going to probably have several prominent community members having their eyes on this and their comments. That's what we're trying to do. There's not just 5 or 10 of us in a corner, trying to get this done and sneak it past somebody. You will have, all your communities will have input.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Vaughn, could you please repeat what you're needing so that way staff will know exactly what you were asking for that you just asked?
Oh, yes. What I was asking for is I was curious, the communities that were below the average. As a matter of fact, I don't know, I'd kind of just like to see the whole list.
Right.
The various, so you said, are there 22 or?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, if that's not too difficult, it might be interesting to all of us to see exactly.
So you want to see the list of 22
student generation rates.
Generation rates. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Ms. Giovanelli, please.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm having computer issues today. I'm just curious if you think, and you may have already answered this and I was not online, the COVID effects. Do you think that's going to slow growth or the economy? I know this is kind of unprecedented, but I'm the economists, what they're predicting. Thank you.
Well, as I mentioned a little bit, maybe you weren't online there. I've been, because of my company and what we do, we're reading a lot of articles and seminars on this topic. I've heard both sides saying it's going to decrease. I've heard some say that when the dust settles, it's going to be a mad dash for all these homes. Because this also impacts not just new housing, this impacts resales too. So it's just people moving around. It's too early to tell, but from now to probably November, I'm going to work with your staff to go by and talk with all the development people, the salespeople, as well as the county, and we'll get a good pulse of what's going on in your district so that when we do our update in October and November with we'll do a new set of 10-year projections when we receive a new student file in October. We'll have a better idea After talking to people, it's just, a lot of the sales offices closed down and they're doing them virtually. So I can't just as easily go and visit them, but things are reopening and we'll have better answers for you in about probably 3 or 4 months. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Morgan, did you have any questions? I didn't see your hand. No? Okay, thank you. And Mr. Cates, I just have
Yes.
2 really quick ones. North Fort Myers, where are they pulled into? Are they pulled into the Cape or are they pulled into the East Zone?
Let me see. Off the top of my head, I'm trying. Maybe someone in the district staff can answer that one.
Yeah, they can send that to me. That was just one question that I had regarding.
Which subzone is North Fort Myers in?
North Fort Myers is W1 for the most part, but it's partially into East 1 also once you pass Slater Road on State Road 78.
Okay.
So it kind of straddles in.
We're probably not going to, moving forward, I would hope that that's not going to be a new dividing line, possibly. We'll see how it all comes together, but that E1, W1 line that divides basically Bayshore Elementary and North Fort Myers Academy of the Arts,
right.
That line may not be there in the future. We'll know later, but I kind of can foresee that maybe that's not another line that we will not have, dividing east and west at that point, with proximity at least.
Okay, no, thank you. And I'm sure the people of North Fort Myers would really appreciate that, not having to cross over. But thank you for that. And then the other question, or you made a comment about free and reduced lunch that you, the whole county is free and reduced lunch. So that was
right.
I wanted to add into there. And pretty much, I love your, how you break everything down. It's just like cutting turf. So I love seeing that. And I really appreciate what you've put together here. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I think that no other questions, so I'm going to, I guess, turn it back over to Dr. Atkins, unless you have something to add?
Well, we'll just make periodic updates to you. Probably, it won't be every 4 months, maybe it'll be every other month we'll be giving you updates.
Great.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. As you could see from the presentation, a lot has gone into this effort. So I appreciate working with Davis Demographics. They've been wonderful to work with, and our staff as well. But we will make sure to keep the board updated. And as you also saw from the presentation, this is very important. We also have to keep our community updated because this is going to be a big change and we need to bring them right along. And so they're well aware of that because they're veterans of these types of processes across the country. And so we will be bringing it to the community in a very short period of time. Next item on the agenda is affordable housing, another update. And again, I'd like to turn it over to TCG and Mr. Dan Oberski for an update on where we are with affordable housing.
Thanks, Dr. Atkins, and thank you, board, for the opportunity to review this. If the presentation can be brought up, we'll move into it and through it. If anybody has questions, we can interrupt or hold it to the end. We'll move relatively quickly through this, and I apologize. I will dive into it. This is intended to provide data points on supply and demand for our heroes. This is both considering our team with teachers, admin support, and staff across the school board, as well as engaging and discussing with FGCU, Lee Health, and other critical providers of services to our community, which has obviously been hypersensitive during this COVID time and discussion. Next slide, please. This is a reference back to what is stable housing. Nationally and internationally, the discussion in America is that our income versus our housing expense should be below 30%. The reality is nearly 70% of Lee County is cost burden, simply stating it's above 30%. The cost of mortgage, the cost of rent, whatever those coordinating factors are, they're in excess. And so I would ask that you all take the time just to kind of pause as you consider these realities when people have housing insecurities and the implications to what that does for families and raising children and ultimately our staff when you have families that are insecure on their housing and or other elements. This has a tremendous amount of pressure and stress that's created for our families. So 43.9% of Lee County renters' household income is under $35,000. That's a big number. We've got somewhere in the range of 280,000 families that live in our community to have nearly half of them living under $35,000, and then trying to determine where individuals are going to live. This is beyond our housing, our own staff, but this is a community-wide challenge. And we'll get into some of the reasons of why that remains that way. But this is just some stats and numbers for you to be able to contemplate what the impact is depending on people's income. Next slide. This shows the vast quantity, 50% of our population essentially being below $50,000. At 281,000, these are stats. The most accurate stats we have actually are a little dated. 2018, we've obviously seen tremendous growth in 18 and 19, and I will share. Many of you might be aware we saw about a 30 to 40 day lull in housing sales, and we have seen astronomical increases in volumes of sales for residential housing. We saw the death of many deals for multifamily, and within that same time period that housing picked up, those acquisitions of large-scale land for residential development and multifamily have caught on fire again. So we're seeing a huge demand. One of the things that we do track and watch are studies on people moving, and U-Haul is a pretty interesting indicator that we're seeing the North be consistently fleeing to the South, and not vice versa. Not too many people trying to get out of our sunny, wonderful state and head north for all sorts of different reasons that maybe, and hopefully that's why you're here. It's a wonderful place, but COVID has hypersensitized where you live. You can go to the next slide. This is specific data asked for staff information from the school district, from FGCU, and from Lee Health. And so everybody has a little bit different way of providing data. The topic at the top, or the information from FGCU, the past 32 months ending in August of 19, they had hired 147 staff members with an average pay of $64,308. That even though there's 147, 101 of the 147's pay were below $60,000, or 70% approximately of those individuals. I don't want to belabor any of these stats, but they're deep, and I also want to continue to move towards the ultimate purpose here. But you can see the outcome of what a $12 an hour is if you go to the middle bracket there in Lee Health for support staff. $12.54 equates to $26,000. Sometimes you hear a minimum wage in the $8 to $9 range, and I think it's hard to extrapolate what that really looks like. So I think it's important to look at that $12 to $15 range, which is kind of what people are speaking to be the minimum viable ability to live. That puts you between $25,000 and $32,000. It's not that the school district or other groups are underpaying, it's that we don't have housing options that are being built for this this classification of economic grouping. Next slide. This is Lee, I'm sorry, that was Lee Health, this is Lee County School District, and kind of same story. At least 50% of our executing staff tends to be in incomes that are challenging. I've looked at a lot of other areas. You guys have done far more studies on pay, and I've seen annual starts for starting wages being far below this. So I applaud the school district for making an attempt to pay their staff what they can to maintain a sustainable school district. And these are data points that I want everybody to be aware of when considering some of the next bits of information, which is where do we house people? Where do we live? What are the options? And if you've not shopped for housing, that's really hard to contemplate if you've never been challenged by an income. Next slide. And this is data that's probably, I put this together about a month ago, so it's a little bit dated. It could be 2 months old, but these are the homes that were for sale. You can see on the right, it just says current listings for sale. No substantial criteria, but about 5,000 units on the resale market. Next slide. You'll see details start to sneak in here, and so the criteria start to plug in. These are homes that are newer than 1990. So we went and we cut the grouping down by about 50% to go to homes that are newer than 1990. Now it's 2020, 30-year-old homes. What I'm trying to communicate are some elements of the inventory and what's actually available and what your choices are if you want something that's newer than 30 years old or in certain income or in certain proximities to jobs. Next slide. This is current listings under $150,000. For the categories that we're looking at, for 50% of the population, when you do a mortgage payment calculation, as soon as you exceed $150,000, 50% of our population can't afford it. That's just the sheer facts. Is you get to 40, 50, and 60% of individuals' incomes, and it's pushed out. So we had 5,000 units that were theoretically available, cut to 2,500, and if you go to under $150,000, we have 156 properties. No criteria. This is just what's available. Next slide, please. This is current listings under $150,000 and newer than 1990. So we went to 18. This is a little bit discouraging. Now, these are single-family homes. Just to be clear, this is single-family homes. This does not incorporate all the options in condos and townhomes, but there's a little bit of a deception that sometimes occurs when you do that. The operating expenses, condo association dues, and other things pop up, and they somewhat offset some of those operating costs that start to change this. So when we're contemplating hiring teachers and staff members, not only in the school district but other areas, this is the data that they're processing to consider moving into our county to serve our students and our medical facilities. Next slide. These are some of the largest new home builders, and this is not any discredit to them at all. They are actually some of our highest providers of potential affordable housing and some of the biggest advocates we have. D.R. Horton and Lennar both have fantastic incentive programs for school teachers and other staff members, and we're having ongoing discussions on how we might be able to get them to locate in proximity to schools and some of the opportunities here. But these are if you're looking at large scale developments, these are the only couple developers that I could even find that had anything even close to the price points that we're talking about. So you can go to the next slide. I included mapping. You can look at where you have to go for a newer home, new development, North Cape, Buckingham area, Lehigh Market. There are a total between these three groups, maybe 7 total developments. And those pricing starts aren't necessarily where you can even finish once you end up with a developed lot or a developed unit. And some of these, as you can see, just to get into that price point, are condos and coach homes of sorts. So next slide. Just for comparison, younger individuals that might, or families that still want to get here and want to look at a different route, might not be able to afford the down payment or have finances to get into the purchase of a property. Wanted you to be aware of the apartments. These are the for rent options without any criteria stuck into place, and there are 5,410 units available in that first slide. Now, if you look closely, you can start to see some refinement that goes through and how this breaks down. And so if you go, that second portion of that slide is for units under $1,000 a month. Okay, just any and all units under 1,000. I didn't refine anything associated to the bedrooms, but we go from 5,000 units to 1,100 units. Next slide. Here we start to put in a little bit more detail. We saw that to be in the $750 range is actually kind of the criteria of a $35,000 to $45,000 income earner, where they need to be for their housing costs on a rental basis. So I plugged in $750, and unfortunately, it dropped down to, I'm having a hard time reading my own stuff here, 652 units. And when I put in 2-bedroom, for reminder, no criteria, so 652 units, that includes studios, 1-bedroom, and so forth. When I go to a 2-bedroom, there's a little less. You can see the number of units that are available, but the locations and the proximity that they exist. Sorry, that says 634 bedroom rentals. I think that was a glitch. You can see the number of locations there. So that's not the accurate number in there, but there are 5 complexes that are under $750 and 2-bedroom plus. Next slide. When you combine, I wanted to show a picture. This is employment density. So if you ignore our specific needs and go to all employers and where their employees go to work, these are the darker the color, the greater the amount of density of jobs that are actual in-place employees located. And so what I wanted to show is just a clean map, and then we overlay transportation, and then you need to kind of, unfortunately, I don't have a filter on my technology to overlay all the different slides that I just went through, but if geographically you can think through it, you'll start to put together the picture of how much more I now have to pay in transportation to get to an affordable unit and get back to my job. Next slide. Okay, this overlays transportation and availability of housing. And so you see a lot of cost of housing options. They still are on the edges of our communities. But then when you incorporate the cost of transportation or the drive, the impact, they do a fully loaded incorporation of gas and impact on your vehicles and how you transport. This is the big issue. Now, I want to just give a quick explanation as to why. Why is it that it's so hard to provide housing? And unfortunately, quite candidly, it has to do with how much demand there is in the high income. And so if you go back up to, and I apologize to do this, slide 2 or 3. Daryl, I'm hoping you're taking me to slide 2 or 3, sorry. Well, what you're going to see, if we can pull that back up, is there's conversation around the income of the earners that are moving to Southwest Florida. And it is pretty well split, but there is so much population that is making north of $75,000 and can afford Class A apartment complexes and high quality, next slide, sorry. There we go. So that you see this big jump in population from the 50,000 and above, and then you see some of the language up above. The last sentence of the last paragraph says the largest share of households have an income in the $75,000 to $100,000 range. This is a very unique category. It fits really well for Class A high cost apartments and $250,000 to $400,000 houses. So you see a vast majority of the product that's being built for that population. And unfortunately, that means our land is sucked up for that category, and our product is forced into that. The differential cost between developing Class B apartments and Class A apartments is so little relative to the lift in rent or in the sales price that there is almost no motivation to produce any of that product. And so that leaves us with this vast challenge of housing versus how do we provide for those that are serving our community. I believe that's actually the last slide that I have. and it is the second of a three-part series. So we're gonna dive into a strategy. The last part of our series will go into discussing strategies and engagement that the school district might be able to consider. We have actively been meeting with large-scale home builders, other community leaders, employers, and other staff members within the county to come up with strategic plans. And so we're going to put out some ideas as to potential excess land that we may not need in the foreseeable future for schools, as well as potential strategies and partners. And that whole presentation will come in the third and final presentation on housing for our heroes. So that's all for me. And any questions, we can go into that.
Thank you so much, Dan. Really appreciate that. Do we have any questions? Ms. Morgan, please.
Mr. Oberski, would you expand a little bit on the working group that includes Lee Health, FGCU, and the school district, and what the mission is of that particular group and how we fit into it?
Sure. Well, there is a couple different categories, and quite candidly, we have representation from the school district, FGCU, and Lee Health in probably 5 different groups, hoping to find ways to continue to provide quality staff for they are pretty much the largest employers in our community. And so we fit into those categories of trying to come up with strategic outcomes. So we have ongoing conversations and also discussions as to who can contribute what to help solve this problem.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else, please? And I know this issue is, I see you, Ms. Gittens. I'll get you in 1 second. I was looking at the hand, so I do apologize. Go ahead, please, Ms. Gittens.
Go ahead and finish your question.
Okay, it really wasn't a question. It was just a statement that I know that the county and everyone is looking to try to do affordable housing, and they did lose the one project that was in North Fort Myers behind the AMC. That was going to be a huge opportunity for people who live in that area, but because the paperwork wasn't turned in, we lost. And it sounded like that's the fit of what you just stated, the $750 that would have accommodated many, many people. So I really appreciate you, you're out there and you're looking to try to solve that issue. So thank you for that.
Ms. Jordan, if I could just respond to that briefly, I would say that if that 116 units as phase 1 could have been done, we would have not scratched the surface of the need. So we only need like 35 and more of us to try and figure this out, and we might be able to cover 10% of the need. But that huge need shouldn't limit our desire to fulfill it.
Right, I agree. Ms. Gittens, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Oberski. I'm interested in the fact that there are a couple of areas that have been identified as opportunity zones. And that term kind of confuses me because you have, while Babcock Ranch is an opportunity zone, and you see the difference, but the two of the areas in the East Zone that are opportunity zones, quotes, are our lowest socioeconomic, and they're mostly like the duplexes. And so my question is, are we potentially looking at someone finally waking up and saying, oh, that's an opportunity zone, the government's going to give us all this money to develop it, and then displace even the areas where people can afford right now? Are you understanding what my question is?
Yeah. Yeah. So gentrification is often the term that people refer to with this. Gentrification is an interesting term, and I won't waste a whole lot of time on that. But the reality and the expectation of opportunity zones has left a lot of curious thought to it. I think,
Scratching my head.
yeah, the zone in the east zones that exist are primarily residential and residential split lots. And the upside is protected, the downside is not in opportunity zones. So how they came to it, which areas they were challenging, it was done really fast. We're still working with the government to try and re-identify or reallocate some of those areas. Our expectation is that if we provide the appropriate housing for the area, that it should not have a vast impact on gentrifying prices or pushing people out. The greatest challenge in that is you want things to be nice and held up in ownership, and there's a basis of if people take care of their properties, if people invest dollars, then values increase. We want to maintain those values for those that live there, and that's kind of
well, and the consideration is though that most of them are they're rentals. You know, there's very interspersed in there. There's a few homeowners, yep, but mostly it's the duplex rentals. So if they are, you know, fixed up for whatever reason, these are not homeowners, so it doesn't fit the opportunity zone mode. And I really am very concerned as we continue to build up to 82. Is across 82 going to be the next portal that they're going to look at? And then
predict that. I can tell you that we are making a very intentional attempt to work with large-scale home developers who sell, and in some circumstances who are restricted to incomes. And so hopefully we can assist with balancing that and providing the right type of opportunities and ideas.
Right, because it's very transient as well, and people are, you know, going, okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'd like to sit down and talk with you about that one day.
Give me a holler.
Is there anyone else, please, who have any comments or questions? Seeing none, thank you so much, Mr. Bursky. I appreciate you. Dr. Atkins, did you have anything to share?
No, we're ready to transition to our capital project update if you're ready.
Yes, sir.
All right, and I believe today Ms. Tina Silcox will be providing the update to the board. There she is. So I'll turn it over to her for our capital project update.
Perfect, thank you.
Good afternoon, board members, Madam Chair, and Dr. Atkins. This is your operations capital update for June of 2020. Starting with the HVAC projects, the capital negotiations are complete and contracts are being executed for Cape Elementary HVAC renovations. Target Builders is the construction manager and GFA is the building official. Connecting the auditorium to the central energy plant at Riverdale High School is 75% complete. Once the air handler units are delivered, we will be complete mid-July. Contracts for the HVAC renovation are executed. Owen Ames Kimball, TLC Engineering, and myself are working together to bring the GMP within the approved total project cost. Moving on to the new construction project, we have Gateway High School, of course. Suffolk Construction continues to lead the industry on the COVID-19 safety guidelines. The site remains closed to non-essential visitors, and everyone that enters the site is required to have their temperatures taken, wear a mask, and personal protection equipment. Buildings A, B, and C are completely dried in. Walls and ductwork are going up. The underground plumbing is complete. All floors are poured, and Principal Watson was able to approve the interior and exterior colors. She chose agreeable gray, cityscape, which is a grayish color, and restrained gold for the interior. The exterior colors are marshmallow and pavilion beige. The roundabout was opened up on the southbound traffic lanes as of Saturday morning. M Middle School, tilt wall panels are being poured for building 1, which is the administration educational building, and scheduled to be erected on July 6th. Precast tilt wall panels for building 2, the gymnasium cafeteria building are formed. 50% of the panels are poured and the remaining will be poured and erected with building 1. Also, the CMU for the centralized energy plant is being constructed and the chiller tower is already on site and set in place. The underground utility and site work is in progress. The fill is being executed from the ponds and being moved to the elementary site for future use. On to portable projects. The Gateway High School portable site for 2021 school year at Lehigh High School. All the portables are set. The ramps and canopies are complete. The transformer has been installed and waiting for FP&L to flip the power switch. Security and fire alarms are complete. Paving of the entry and parking area is 90%, and the furniture is expected to arrive June 26. Canopies for existing portables at Mirror Lakes Elementary, Lehigh Acres Middle, and Trafalgar Middle are ongoing. Canopies at Lehigh Acres Elementary, Varsity Lakes Middle are complete. Renovation projects throughout the district. Next slide. Contracts are executed for James Stevens, the pre-K renovation project. OneSource Construction is currently submitting necessary documents to receive the notice to proceed from the district. Construction is scheduled to start late July. The kitchen renovations at Bayshore Elementary, J. Cullen English, Mirror Lakes, Treeline, Fort Myers Middle, Diplomat Middle are underway. Preparations for freezer coolers are complete and waiting for the delivery. Construction is underway for the outside dining at Fort Myers Middle School. The freezer cooler expansion at Gulf Elementary, primary and intermediate, is in the GMP process. Roofing projects. During the investigation at Cypress Lake High School, they found a double layer of roof material, which drove the cost above the total project cost that was approved by the board. So they're going to bring that back to you next month. The procurement department is currently negotiating the Lee County Public Education Center roofing project with Target Builders. The total project cost will be presented to you in July. The good news is North Fort Myers High School roofing GMP came in under budget and is expected to start construction next month. Traffic improvement projects are ongoing and expected to be completed by August 1st, with the exception of Diplomat, Elementary, and Middle. They are ahead of schedule and should be completed by July 19th. This concludes your update. Do you have any questions on the update?
Thank you so much. Let me see if we have any questions. Ms. Gittens, please.
Thank you. Superintendent, I'm kind of fuzzy about our conversation, but we were talking about the new type of HVAC equipment in light of all of the COVID virus things. Do you remember that conversation? And the fact that we were saying it would be a little more expensive, however, would be, and I'm just wondering, are we looking at that with some of these replacements, or are they too far already along?
Tina, if you want to elaborate on that, I know that we've had discussions with operations about the use of ultraviolet light to help to sterilize. And I think part of our conversation, Ms. Gittens, might have had to do with the magnetic chillers, which really you're talking about very little friction, so you have they're much more efficient in terms of
and the ultraviolet, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. So both of those moving forward. I know the Gateway High School, for example, I believe has the mag chillers, and Tina's the project manager, so And I know I heard that's her baby down there, the
Mhm.
housing of HVAC system. So I'll let her elaborate on that.
I think we could engage our engineers to see what the cost would be and if the board would be willing to approve the added cost, and certainly move forward with that if you so chose to. We did put a ultraviolet light out at Alva a few years back, so we have done it in the district, and we were very open to that. Cape Elementary, we are just adding air handler units and DX units there, replacing the old. There may be an opportunity there, but we can certainly check into it and get back with you on that.
And what about Riverdale?
Riverdale High School, we could do that. Right now, my project is connecting the auditorium with a central energy plant so that we remove the DX units there, and it's a lot less expense for energy for the district. So we could look at that as well.
Can I ask then, probably Ms. Fisher, Madam Chair, if we could get the information brought to us as a board, the comparative costs? Because, looking forward, who knows, this was our first, hopefully last pandemic, but it would be good to be able to see if as we are replacing at this point, rather than having to go back and look at that in the long run. And thank you.
Ms. Gittens, compare the cost of exactly what, please, so I can, Ms.
Of the different chiller systems. Tina, you know the exact names, the ultraviolet and the magnetic, is it?
Magnetic chillers, yes, ma'am.
The magnetic chillers versus, I guess, whatever the other one is that's not.
DX units.
All right, thank you.
No, thank you for reiterating that for me. Okay, next, if
I'm not mistaken,
go ahead.
Tina can correct me, but you've got the DX and the magnetic are the two types of chillers. The ultraviolet is something that's like an add-on.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, so Tina, you understand what she's looking for then?
Yes, ma'am.
So the comparison of all three. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Okay, and then I have Ms. Morgan, please.
Yes. So questions about roofs. We had the collapse of the flat roof at Bonita Elementary, and I heard you say today that we have a cost overrun at the Cypress Lake High School because there's a double roof there. Bonita Elementary was a new roofing project, and there seems, from what I understand, there may have been a structural issue. I'm just surprised that in these roofing projects, we're not aware of some of the underlying issues that may affect both the price and the quality of the work done. So I'm just curious. I don't know that Bonita Springs is the capital project, but it's just a question in general about when we approach roofing projects, what exactly are we doing?
We have a roofing consultant. Steve Hanna is our project manager for the roofing, and I know at Cypress Lake High School, when they started doing the roofing investigation, that's when they found there was 2 layers of roofing inside of there, and that's all you can have is 2 layers. One of the layers had turned into mush, so now we have to pay to have that removed. And I believe that's going to be a $750,000 price tag is what I was told. So he will be bringing that back to you. And I don't think they could have found that until they started taking off the one roof. They wouldn't have found the first one.
We don't have a record of the maintenance that is done on these projects. So one looks at Cypress Lake High School and the record shows that they had a roof installed on such and such a date, and then 40 years later they had a second roof installed. So we're looking at a double roof removal.
I would think we do, and I think that should be something in the future that we look into and do our research.
And then can you tell me anything more about Bonita Springs?
That is actually a maintenance project, so I'm not clear,
Okay.
but I agree with you that it was a structural issue.
Well,
Okay, thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Ms. Morgan, I think someone else is going to answer for you.
Well, I just want to jump in real quick. Thank you, Tina, for providing those quick answers. I know that was not what you probably had anticipated answering on us. I just appreciate you being honest in the response. And I just kind of want to validate and just kind of reiterate a couple points. One is, just like with a roof, like Tina mentioned, when you're planning for a construction project, sometimes in that first initial step, they are having to dig in and really uncover, what compounding issues have occurred. So they're actually analyzing getting below the roof material, and they find out there's been significant water intrusion and potential damage. That can, of course, increase the cost and the scope of the work that has to get done. So sometimes when you see dramatic changes in the price estimates, it's because initially there might be a price estimate done based on kind of historically what was the cost of the material, a similar level of square footage it was done, and then after you actually dig in, you find there's significant additional mitigation that has to occur as a part of that work. Now, in the case of Bonita Elementary, you have a few things. One is that it's a historical structure, and again, I just want to make sure we're very clear here. I think we've tried to be very clear in all the communications we put forward that until a structural engineer reviews this in depth, the roof collapse, certainly there was new roof construction, but in terms of what the cause of the collapse is pretty significant before rushing to judgment over exactly what it was and who's at fault and what should have been done differently. There's just a whole lot to that. Like for instance, the structural renovations that have been done at Bonita Elementary in 97, 98. And so I just don't want to oversimplify it, but certainly every time, it's a big aspect of the maintenance apparatus here in the district is that after this construction is done, essentially once construction finishes the job, they turn it over to maintenance. Maintenance certainly does have a record of the work that's been done, and certainly when they do new big projects, they absolutely are reviewing the history of the work that's been done. We also have folks who've been here, like Scott Rickenbacher, for example, who's not here today with us. He built quite a few of these schools that we currently have, and so having the staff on hand who have the historical understanding of what was done is very helpful as well. So there's a whole lot to it. We certainly don't want to get into specifying an exact cause at this time for Bonita Elementary, but that's something we're very well aware of. We do have a structural engineer reviewing that to ensure that we have safety moving forward on that particular project.
Okay, so I just want to say thank you, Tina, for answering the question. And Rob, I want to say that I really do think we need to be looking at processes, and so that's my comment. I realize it's complicated. I realize we don't have all of the answers, but I think, as you often say, every challenge we face presents an opportunity for us to learn something more about how to do things better. So that's my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan. Ms. Giddens, I see your hand up, but I'm going to ask Ms. Vaughn to speak first, and then I'll come back to you because she hasn't had an opportunity yet. So Ms. Vaughn, please.
I was just going to piggyback on something Ms. Morgan just said. If I heard her correctly in her first comments, it sounds like, we're going to have to approve now more money for the reconstruction of the Cypress Lake High School roof. And it sounds like having the initial layer that was actually spongy, that, when we put it out to bid or however that process, Ms. Morgan mentioned process, it seems to me that should have been in the initial amount of money that was brought before the board, even if it were, it could be up to and add that $750,000 if we find that there's an extra, but certainly these things exist somewhere in the record. And, I just feel like those things need to be checked out before things are brought in front of us, the money. So that was my comment.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. And Mr. Savage, I believe, Dr. Savage, I know, because I've had my roof repaired twice. And I know that, you know, they gave me a price, and when they get there and they start tearing it off, you know, they found more, you know, stuff underneath of what they thought was good. So there's always those hidden, it's hard, it's hard to predict what's underneath of all of that. But I do understand what you're saying, but I know from firsthand experience, I've had that happen to me twice with my roof. Ms. Gittens, please.
Yes, and I agree with the other two ladies that have spoken. In looking at structural issues and our liability versus the contractor's liability, which kind of brings it back to Attorney Dupree-Bruno. And I was talking with her the other day about our contracts and how I know the legal teams and all are working on updating our contracts, and that we have various contracts for different things. And it just kind of brings to mind that we do need to look at, I mean, I don't know at this point if we are contractually liable or they are, but it brings to mind that we need to make sure that our contracts are as tight on our behalf as we possibly can for situations like this, and maybe looking at this type of roofing contracts.
I would concur, you know, contracts are a pretty significant concern to all of us. And I think that's why we're so grateful to have the legal team, our staff team, as well as Ms. Dupuy-Bruno. It's, you know, that as an organization, it's extraordinarily important to be very proactive in terms of from a contractual standpoint. I just want to, again, you know, reiterate what I said earlier, which is, you know, while the roof certainly collapsed, if there could have been a variety of other aspects associated to it. So to jump right to a roofing contract as opposed to the structure upon which it was the roof, you know, there's those all. It's just I can't do it justice to kind of go into all that piece. It isn't just as simple as the, you know, who did the roofing work and the roofing material. It very well could be the structural side of it, which was done in 97, 98. So, you know, in any case, every aspect of the building component, every aspect of our building maintenance, of our construction, everything that we engage in, it's very important that everything from a legal standpoint, from a contractual standpoint, is fully explored and that we are in the right type of contracts. And it's why I applaud our legal team on the work they are doing to really dig in and be proactive, not just, you know, reaching settlements and doing things that, you know, are putting out fires, but really trying to get ahead of the problems before they develop. So I just want to kind of reiterate what you said, Ms. Gittens, and how grateful we are for Ms. Dupuy-Bruno, as well as our staff legal team, and that real proactive work on the contracts. It's very labor intensive, takes a lot of work, but it's very well worth it in the end.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I do not see any other hands up for this. And then Ms. Tina, will you be doing the change order, or would that be someone else?
That's me.
Okay, thank
you
you.
have the report. Do you have any questions on the change order report?
Does anybody have any questions on the change order? Do I see any questions? Nope, it looks like there are none.
Perfect.
So thank you so very much. We really appreciate you being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Ms.
Have a good day.
Dupuy-Bruno, did you have something to say?
No, I was just waiting for you to get to public comment.
Oh, okay. I was like, oh, she has something to say. Okay, so moving on to public comments. Do we have any public comments?
No, ma'am.
We do not.
There are no public comments.
Perfect. So seeing none, we will then move on to board member comments. And do we have any board member comments? I will start with Ms. Morgan.
My only comment is I thought this today was a very productive, or this afternoon was a very productive use of our time. I thought both presentations did a lot to enlighten me about some of the complications of the issues facing us. I thought they were terrific presentations and wanted to say so. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Giovanelli. please. Do you have any member comments?
I have none. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fisher?
I have none at this moment. Thank you.
I was reading your lips. Ms. Vaughn, please. Do you have any comments?
Yes. Yesterday at the workshop, there were a couple questions that board members brought forth about the reopening of schools task force, and I have some information for you based on that. First of all, I did give you the correct information about the subcommittees. It was asked if the subcommittees were being recorded. Yes, but because often there are several subcommittees perhaps meeting at the same time, as I said yesterday, they are not live streamed. I believe the last of them will be meeting today or early tomorrow. And the best way to find that is just to go to the school's YouTube page. They're not up yet. They may be up later on this afternoon or certainly by tomorrow. So that's the answer on the subcommittees. Secondly, there was a request for our reopening schools, the email, the inquiries, and the questions, suggestions that had been mailed in. And Cindy McClung is the contact on that. And even as we were meeting, she emailed to the entire board an excellent source for everybody, and so you can see exactly the concerns and what has been emailed in to the group. So that should cover those two requests from yesterday. And I just want to remind everyone who may be listening that we have a dedicated email address. It is reopening schools, no dots, all two words together, reopening schools at leeschools.net. And your questions, comments, suggestions will go directly to our contact, who happens to be Miss Cindy McClung, and they will be recorded. And she verified what I mentioned yesterday, that and you'll see that as you look down the list, that we have many that are duplicates. I mean, not exact duplicates, but and we have comments, everything from no way can we be reopening schools to yes, we need to do full reopening. So I hope that that is helpful to everybody. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn, and thank you so much for bringing that back to us, keeping us informed. Ms. Patrica.
Thank you. Just a few things. I attended the Anestero High School virtual graduation ceremony at a local restaurant here. A local owner of a restaurant opened up his restaurant early so that some of the teachers and staff could watch the graduation ceremony, and it was really bittersweet. And it also illustrated, I sat next to the woman who was in charge at the school of putting the ceremony together, and the hours and hours and hours and hours that went into making sure everybody's name was spelled correctly and making sure that every student had the opportunity to present a quote, and all of that was enlightening to me. I haven't had a ton of events on my calendar, but I have been spending a ton of time on the FSBA task force work surrounding the reopening of schools. I mean, hours and hours and hours a day. The tremendous talent from across the state that's coming together to put this together has been fantastic. Ms. Gittens indicated earlier that I had mentioned a move or a desire to address proximity schools at the middle and high school level. I just want to be clear. I'm very open to looking at it at the middle school level, but don't necessarily at this time have an interest in looking at it at the high school level. I'm incredibly proud of the centers of excellence that we have located in each zone across the county, and I think that's a tremendous benefit to our students. So I just wanted to be clear there. And I also really appreciated Ms. Gitten's comments surrounding equity and diversity as we move to proximity for elementary. I don't know how we're going to do it. I mean, we've hired a very capable consultant who has significant experience in this area, so I'm hopeful. But that is my biggest concern as we go into this, is making sure that we have equity and diversity in our schools. And finally, Dr. Atkins, a question for you that you don't have to answer right now. You know, I've been sending you a ton of questions regarding reopening, and they're not questions I want answered as much as they are things I want staff to be thinking about as we're reopening. And so my question is, how engaged are our charters as we consider reopening, and how engaged will they be in any potential teacher training we would have to give, or parent messages, or anything along those lines? Again, no answer required. I just want you guys to be thinking about that if you don't mind. Please and thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Patrica. I just made myself disappear. Ms. Gittens, please. Do you have any comments?
Just basically, I want to reiterate what Ms. Morgan said. These were very good and very a very good use of our time. I agree with that, Ms. Morgan. And I think everyone was able to learn a lot more about what's going on. I still have a very big concern about how the equity and the proximity. I sent you all an email, and in there, there are some bullet points. The second bullet point, you'll understand my concern, and I'll bring that up later. The other things I will bring up, I'm glad that excuse me, we have the professionals working on these things that we discussed today, and all we have to do is give a final, because this is a lot of work and a lot of thought has to go into a lot of moving parts. And thank you to all of them that are doing that. Appreciate that.
Okay, thank you so much. And I thank you, Ms. Gittens and Ms. Morgan. I think all of us have the same concern about the kids and making sure that we have that diversity in everything that we do. So thank you for that. Ms. Dupree Bruno, there you go. I apologize.
Yeah, I don't have anything at this time.
Thank you. Dr. Atkins, please. Do you have anything?
No comments at this time.
Okay. Was there anything for good of the order? Seeing none, thank you for a wonderful meeting, and this meeting is adjourned. See you soon.